Welcome to another edition of This Week in UNC Baseball with head coach Scott Forbes. I'm Tommy Ashley. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. That's Grace Nugent. The man in the middle is Scott Forbes. Scott, a great weekend, a great week, a great 9 days for your program. A grind, but a lot of wins. But I want to ask you something sort of off the beaten path just a little bit. And it's not about the chicken we were talking about off the air. I'm hungry already, so I won't go there. But getting to know your players. Hubert Davis today talked about he has to know his players to coach his players. How much does that apply for you when you've got 40, 45 guys around? Obviously, more players than in basketball, but from a coaching standpoint, how much do you have to actually know these guys to be able to coach them effectively?
I think you have to know them well, and it's my responsibility to get to know them well. And I don't take it lightly. And we just had a staff meeting. We try to meet every morning that we can, but we talk about that. Being transformational. And you get caught up easily. The games start going. You think about the games, you think about the wins, having to do this, recruiting, the next year's team. But you can't lose sight of why you're coaching, the power of your words. So I agree 100% with what Coach Davis said. To get the most out of every player individually, you have to get to know that player individually. And some are harder to get to know than others. Some of them are a little more close to the vest, maybe more quiet, but that's where, in my opinion, your job as a head coach is. I think it's baloney that you can't get to know every player. That's just a choice that you make.
Yeah, I mean, you got to know what makes people tick, and we've talked about it before, who you can get on, who you have to uplift, and all that stuff. Speaking of lifting up, your ranking has gone up to 4 in some publications. I wanted to ask about rankings, but in a different way. They don't matter at this point in the season. You still got a ton of ball games to play, but ultimately, given the way seeding works when you get down in the ACC tournament, beyond in the College World Series, these early season rankings matter more than probably most, I think, in college baseball. So your thoughts on them, and how do you manage that versus managing expectations from you, your coaching staff, and your players, given how highly ranked you guys are this early?
Yeah, I meet it head on. I tell our guys it does not matter. What matters is today and getting better today and being ready the best we can to play our game against Coastal tomorrow. I told them yesterday, 2018, we were 8-8. In 2011, we weren't preseason ranked, but sometimes you can see it coming. I felt like this team was older. I thought we had a chance to be ranked pretty high and to potentially, have to learn to deal with being ranked pretty high. If anything, I just remind our guys, the higher ranked you are, the higher level of play your opponent's going to be, because people do pay attention to them. Oh, we're going to play so-and-so, ranked so-and-so. But at the end of the day, too, you can embrace them and be like, if you get to number 1, that's a good thing. Because that means a lot of people think you're pretty good and you need to play that way, but it doesn't really affect anything from the standpoint of what you're doing every single day. It shouldn't. And if it does, like Coach Saban says, just a bunch of rat poison. And I sent him that video last night, actually. Like, that's where you have to protect your players and just say, hey, don't buy into it. Bass, pointed him out. You've been struggling. You went 4 for 5. Well, when you wake up tomorrow, that 4 for 5 is gone. What are you going to do today to try to go 4 for 5 again?
How many Nick Saban videos do you have in the rotation?
Quite a bit. But I have other videos too. And you want to keep them short. I remember being in college. Heck, now, if you send me a 2-hour something, or even a movie, it better be really good, or I'm just gonna going to cut the movie off or walk out of the movie theater if it's not keeping my attention. But we have a good rotation of different ones, but I like to give them new videos, and we discuss them shortly in our meetings. And I explained to the guys, I promise you, I'm not sending you anything on my behalf. I'm sending you something that I feel like is going to help you, number one, hopefully in your life, but also help our team. But I've got some go-tos for sure. My favorite Nick Saban video is definitely the 2-minute sermon he gives on nothing, because I think it's very accurate for all of us. And as far as if we approach it that way when we wake up every single day, then chances are we're going to be better that day.
Yeah, I remember they did that on College Game Day as well. But
yeah, it was good.
Yeah, you guys are at the end of your non-conference weekend series schedule. You have some tough midweeks this week. How have you kind of used this tough non-conference to prepare your team for the ACC and a lot of the road ACC games since you're leaving the state a lot more this year?
Yeah, when we looked at our schedule this year, we knew that we were having to go, and fly, but be on the road more. We were on the road the same amount, but not on the road, quote, on airplanes and that type of thing in hotels. But you want to play in the toughest environments you can. You want to try to get on the road, and we did that at East Carolina. We did that in a neutral site in Durham. We're going to go to Elon throughout there to mix that in. We go to Wilmington on purpose right before we go to Louisville. It just helps you get used to playing somewhere else, and understanding that it is harder when it's away from home. But you can't use that as an excuse. I remind our guys, you can't tell me in the third inning you can't see, because both teams are playing with the same batter's eye in the same conditions. They practice under it more than we do. But at the end of the day, once the game starts, the bases are the same distance and the game's being played the same. So, but you do want to try to prepare your guys the best you can. The higher level of competition you play, the better pitching you see, the better lineups you see, definitely help you when you get into our league. That's for sure.
Talking about, I guess, grading, maybe you say a lot that batting average is overrated or not really a thing you look at. So when you are, I don't like the word grading, but when you're evaluating your players, their at-bats, what's the process that you and Coach Wiersbicky and Coach Jackson and the rest of the staff do to evaluate guys on how they're performing, not just game to game, but thus far in the season?
Yeah, well, we call them quality at bats. We started the chart a long time ago. An example of that would be a leadoff double, and then you hit a ground ball to second base. That's a quality at bat because that's a plus advance. It gets the guy from second to third. Now he's at third with one out, easier to score. Is it a deep at bat? Does Kane kept the lead off the game? He ends up striking out, but the pitcher throws 18 pitches. That's a plus quality at bat, even though the result is not good on the average side. But there's nothing wrong with using that word grading because there are grades in the major league scale. We kind of have the same type of scale, but we even incorporate what your body language is like. How do you walk up to the plate? Body language, do you exude confidence? Can you tell whether or not you're swinging it well, you're not swinging it well? What's your routine like in between pitches? How do you handle a bad call from an umpire? All that goes into the total equation that we talk to our hitters about. And then at the end of the day, you try to convince your hitters that you're trying to control what you can control from the standpoint of getting a good pitch to hit and getting your A swing off. If you do those two things, you have a chance of success more than failure. But you also got to realize you can do those two things perfect, have perfect body language, walk in there perfect, hit an absolute rope 112 off the bat, and it goes directly to the right fielder. It goes directly to the center fielder. So you have to understand that before. But really grading the whole thing, and then, did you have a great at bat in a big situation too? Are you doing even better when it matters the most? You're 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts, but then you have an at bat and you work a walk, even though you didn't get a hit. You work the walk, you read a dirt ball, then you read another dirt ball and you score. So the thing is trying to get your players to understand that the things that don't show up in the box score are the things a lot of times that win the game. But we are grading, are you swinging at your pitches and are you getting a really good swing off? And that's where the exit velocity and all that stuff comes in. I'm not big on exit velocity off a tee. I'm bigger on exit velocity in a game.
So, just so folks understand, and I often say this when it's high school kids or kids being recruited, is like they're not just watching you in the box; they're watching everything you do. You're doing that now with your guys. So, how do you handle bad body language on a strikeout? Maybe it was a bad call or whatever. How in the weeds are you getting with your players in those type situations, say when they're not having success or when they're having success and they may be, peacocking a little bit? And I haven't really seen your
Yeah.
guys do that a lot.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, what you allow is what you encourage, and it's all a matter of what your standards are and your culture are, and you got to set that first. So our guys know, if you're playing at the University of North Carolina, you're going to have good body language. You may not have it but 99% of the time you're going to. It's just not an option. So you're going to have to figure that side out. I'm going to work with you to help you figure it out. But if you can't figure it out, then it's going to be a tougher conversation, and you're not going to be able to figure it out in a game because you're going to be on the bench. But it's something that we work on a lot. Show some videos of good body language, bad body language, and the thing that doesn't lie, the teams or the individual players that have sustained success, not just a 1 year, but sustained success that are always pretty consistent. They have great poise. They control their tempers. Their body language is much better than it is when it's, okay, everybody's human. You're going to make a mistake. But again, having a relationship with every individual guy, talking to them about the importance of it, helping them slow down. But it's something we work on. And, when you make it part of your program, the guys understand quickly. It's just no different, Tommy, than when you walk into the dugout. If you walk without your shirt tail in, I'm going to absolutely light you up. So just tuck your shirt tail in. Keep your locker clean. It's not that hard because that's what we do here. And then you have to make sure as the coach that you're sticking to those principles. You got a guy that's 6 minutes late for the pregame meal. He doesn't play. But you have to stick to that if he's your 3-hole hitter and he's got 16 home runs. And I was fortunate because that's the system I played for with Coach Fox, and I saw that, and I saw how well it works. And it's the same. But some guys are just so competitive, they fight it, controlling their body language. And I was one, so I feel like I can help these guys. I had a bad temper. But once I learned with help from Coach Fox how to kind of control that in the right way. But we also want our guys to be emotional. I want them to play with emotion. I want them to play with fire, but I want it all dictated towards our team, our dugout. Because if you're Bush League and you don't have some humility, you're going to get that humble pie, and the game always gets you. So you have to respect the game and play it the right way.
Similarly, I remember I talked with Ryan Lynch, and he said that he really liked watching himself pitch. That was really important to him. And Jason told me that he'll kind of look at his outings the day after he pitches. How do you go about grading your pitchers, having them watch their outings that goes beyond the typical ERA, free passes, strikeouts kind of numbers that we see on a box score?
Yeah, it's the same thing as the hitters, Grace. Just evaluate yourself and be honest with yourself. We should do the same as coaches. Like, how did I handle the situation in this situation? Did I lose my poise? Did I lose my temper? Because at the end of the day, it definitely starts with whoever is the head coach. But with the players too, like challenging them to go back, watch their outings. Did you may have thought that was a really good pitch, but it wasn't where you wanted it. But most importantly, watch how you're going about your business. What does the hitter see when they step in there? Because it's the same. If I'm a hitter and I walk in and I see some hesitation, or I see a pitcher that I can just tell that he's not as confident as he needs to be, then I feel like I have a leg up on him as long as I'm confident in the box. And I'm a baseball person, so I love watching history and stuff. So you read about like the Nolan Ryans and the Bob Gibsons, their hitters would say they didn't even look at those guys, because if you looked at Bob Gibson, you knew that like you were done, because he was that dominant. He had that gaze, like, I'm going to throw this ball right under your neck if you look at me again. So that's what we talk about our pitchers. Like, you got the ball, so you're on offense. You're not on defense. Convincing them like you got guys behind you playing defense, but you are trying to push that ball down the hitter's throat, make them swing the bat, throw as many strikes as you can, and be in complete control. And then working on slowing the game down when you hit a batter, they hit a double. You'll notice a pitcher, he'll give up a double. A lot of times he'll back up the base and run to the mound. Well, we talk to our guys about like slow walk back to the mound, take a deep breath, that doubles over, move on to the next pitch. Then on the reverse side, if every time you strike somebody out, you're yelling at the other dugout and you're beating your chest, that's just not going to work. It's a matter of time before that humble pie gets you. So having that balance where you can be fiery, you can pump your fists, but you got to do it the right way. But the video doesn't lie. And we video our dugout during games to see, what our body language is like as a dugout. Are you engaged? If you're not playing, are you locked in? And if you watch yourself and you grade yourself, you're pretty honest with yourself. You're like, oh, I got to do better in that area.
Yeah. I mean, talking about kind of the intangibles on the mound, Jason seems to exemplify that fearlessness a lot. I've seen him really in his past 2 starts absolutely just dominate. He's not nibbling around the strike zone at all. I think that 5-pitch inning that he had on Friday really exemplified that. People made contact, but it was because he was so fearless to just pound the strike zone with his own stuff. How have you seen him kind of exemplify that fearlessness on the mound?
Now, you got to recruit command first. So you got to give the credit to Coach Gaines and Coach Howell and our whole coaching staff, because if you don't throw strikes, it's hard to teach somebody to throw strikes. Your command can get better, but then making your players understand that the more you're in that zone, the more you're pounding the strike zone, the better the game's going to go as far as flow goes. Your defenders are going to be engaged more, but then you're going to be better too, because then you can tunnel your off speed off of those pitches, and then you're going to get more swings and misses that would have been called balls if you're constantly in the zone. So we also work on with our pitchers, every pitch should be competitive. Like I hate a waste pitch. I don't believe in it. It might be a setup pitch, but when I was a pitching coach, I would tell our pitchers, like, you're not just throwing a ball 4 baseballs out. Why do that? That's 1 pellet less that you might need later in the game. So if we throw a fastball up, that is a ball, but we're throwing it for a reason. That's a pitch that's going to set up maybe a cutter down and away, that type of thing. So being more specific with when you don't try to throw a strike, which you're normally trying to do, you're throwing that pitch to set up the next pitch.
I love it. I hate wasted pitches too. I hate people saying, good miss. And I understand what a good miss is, but wasted pitches, I love the pellet reference.
The wasted pitches, I mean, you want a competitive pitch is what I say. Like if I see a pitch and I know, because I have the pitch comm in my hat, I know exactly where it was called. If it's called up and in to a right-handed hitter and it goes behind the right-handed hitter, well, there's a wild pitch and a non-competitive pitch. You want the hitter to think when the ball comes out of the hand that they might have to swing. But then understanding like, okay, yeah, we're throwing the slider down, but we're throwing it to a specific spot where the hitter still thinks it could be a strike. I can't stand the just wasted fastballs, especially in an 0-2 count that are this far out with a trap man zone. Like, unless we have a scout report, that must be a really bad hitter if we're throwing it there.
And there are only so many bullets in the gun.
Correct.
And if you shoot one off the net, then it's a waste there. Let me ask you a question about, obviously you talk about, and you've talked about a lot on this show, you recruit command first, and then you have the velocity and all the mechanics. But what do you recruit in the head for a pitcher? What can you not recruit because a player either has it or doesn't, or what can you not teach because they have it or does it? And what's the most important aspect there for you? Grace mentioned fearlessness.
Competitiveness. If you're not competitive, I'm gonna have a hard time. I would say competitive would be like when I go watch a kid pitch, I like to see him competing, being caught up in the competition. Obviously, the character and integrity is, you got to check that box, or we're just going a different direction. But competitive kids, and you like a little athleticism, we do on the mound, guys that are pretty athletic that might play another position when they're not pitching. Not all of them do that, but they might have when they were younger. And then velocity is just an added bonus. But it's if I don't feel like a kid is ultra competitive, we're usually going to walk away from the ability.
Who surprised you that you've recruited? And you probably don't need to call a name on that aspect, but who surprised you in a positive way with something that maybe you didn't even see in the recruiting process?
Whew, man, I mean, you get all kinds of surprises, but on the mound, sometimes it can be like a jumping velo, maybe like, wow, like, I thought Cam Padgett was always competitive and had control, but I didn't know he'd be touching 95. I thought maybe, hey, this kid's going to end up getting to 90. So things like that. And then offensively, a guy like an Angel Zarate, he is competitive, but he's, kind of weak, but he's a pretty good high school hitter. And then he ends up being one of the best hitters we've had here ever for 2 years. If you look at number of hits and what he did for us. The fun part about coaching too is watching guys become more confident. They're competitive, but their confidence wavers sometimes with performance, but learning to handle that failure and that type of thing. But there are a lot of surprises you get. Most of them are good too.
You talked about guys kind of increasing their confidence. Who have you seen's confidence really increase thus far this season, either from last season or the fall or even the preseason?
Oh man. We work hard on that too as a team, just talking about, okay, I remember Coach Fox asking me in an individual meeting, does your confidence waver with performance? And you try to say it doesn't, but then you're like, actually it does. And his next question is, well, how do we make it where it doesn't? Because you're going to fail some. So that's where defining success like we do here. Are you prepared? Are you working? Are you lifting hard? Are you a good teammate? Are you getting your sleep? If you're doing all that stuff and, you fail, your confidence shouldn't waver because you did all those things. You just didn't get it done. And that's a challenge because we all know if you get a couple hits, your confidence as a hitter a lot of times goes up. But watching guys mature, like a Hunter Stokely, like I feel like Stokes playing like he is just because he's confident that no matter what, he's confident in his defense, he's confident in his base running, he's going to be confident at the box. If he has a terrible bat and chases 3 pitches and swings out of the zone on a pitch, it's not a big deal to him. Where I felt like earlier in his career, if he went out of the zone high, then he chased the ball low, the next pitch he was swinging at. He doesn't do that as much. So, but there are other ones as well. The young guys too. A guy like Ryan Lynch, see him struggle at ECU and be able to remain confident, which tells me, he's buying into it and he believes that he works and he's ready. And you got to have that quick, that next play mentality of the last play's over no matter what. And it's going to be a crying shame if you miss the current situation because you're so focused on the last play or yesterday or that type of thing.
I think Walker McDuffie exemplified that yesterday, walking his first batter and then closing out the game. What have you seen? You mentioned Ryan Lynch. What have you seen from Ryan Lynch and Walker and Cameron Seagraves, the intangibles that they have, the stuff between the ears that has let them find success, especially in those later inning situations?
I would say the thing they have the most in common is how competitive they are. And when I say competitive, the guys get competitive. I've been in the locker room. You end up getting competitive in everything you do. It could be a mile run, for time. It could be whatever it is. They're about there playing MLB The Show, Fortnite, ping pong. It comes out pretty quick. Like, man, that guy does. And you want as many of those in your locker room as possible, where it literally feels like when you lose, like a black cloud. Like, that means your program's in a good spot because, number one, you don't lose a lot and everybody's ticked off about it. And everybody wants to we do have to move on and get ready for the next day, but that's not a bad thing because you that team mentality of all that matters when we walk back here as a team is, did we get it done? But those guys are just so competitive. And then you throw in, they got nasty stuff too. I mean, that's clear. they're up to 96 and they have good off speed. So, but again, they have work to do. They got some little things they have to keep getting better at.
Talking with head coach Scott Forbes, start to wrap up here a little bit. I want to talk about Tyson Bass because I thought it was interesting that he talked about Coach Wierzbicki correcting him while he was in the on-deck circle this weekend, and it certainly paid off. How much goes in, and if folks haven't watched that postgame, it's posted on Inside Carolina, but how much goes into on-the-fly coaching like that, Coach Forbes?
I think a lot goes into it. You have to have a feel for what's going on in the game. We take a lot of pride as a coaching staff of being locked in from the first pitch to the last, no matter what the score is, no matter who the opponent is, because we're asking our players to do the same thing. And that's why we have it like it is. Coach Weirs is in the dugout because he is our hitting coach, and he may see something. And I tell our coaches all the time, don't wait. It might be too late. Like, kids at this level have to be coachable. They have to know that what we say to them is only to try to help them. If they take it the wrong way and they can't, be able to process it and still go in there and compete, they're probably not the right guy anyway at this level. So you have to be able to, but a lot goes into it. It could be something on the mound you see. It could be a base running lead. It could be something that Coach Wierzbicki noticed with Tyson that it's going to help him before he goes up. And then having the trust of each other, like, hey, I trust what Coach Weirs is telling me. I'm not just going to throw it out one ear and just do my own thing.
Last question for me, and then Grace can wrap it up. But you obviously, and you talked about it a lot, you'll switch the lineups. You're 12-0 this year. You've had multiple batting orders already. What goes into that process to determine, hey, we're winning, but this might be a little better, or this might help us more? You've moved Madera up and down. You've moved Gallagher up and down. Just sort of walk us through the process that you and your coaching staff decide on that when things are going well, because it's easy to change when things are going bad. When things are going well, the change to get better is a little more complicated and a little more insightful, I guess, into your way of coaching.
Yeah, I think, it's something that in a superstitious game, you have to get past quickly. Like, okay, if you do have some superstitions, that shouldn't be one of them. Just because you're winning games, it doesn't mean that you can't find something that will make you even better. And you have to be, as a head coach, you have to be fine with whatever anybody wants to think. Like, we changed the lineup with 4 different spots, but we lose. Well, why did you change the lineup? I don't care. You got to eliminate that first. And then to me, it's all about, like, okay, what we're preaching to our players, well, we got to make sure we preach it to ourselves from the standpoint of what is the best thing for us today. Like yesterday, like that lineup was good. We won yesterday, but does this lineup work better against Coastal tomorrow night? Like we talked about today, okay, there probably will be one or maybe one change in that lineup just because we feel like that is a better lineup against Coastal, and believing in that and knowing that, hey, if you close your mind to that just because you're playing well, I don't know if you're maximizing the potential of the team, I guess is the best way I would explain it. And you also don't want to reinvent the wheel. But we never do that here. That's the thing. Like, all the egos are checked. It's not about me or Coach Wierzbicki or Coach Jackson or him saying this guy should hit 2. If I said he should hit 1, I didn't hit him 1 because Coach Weirs wanted to hit another guy 1. I'm not going to walk back there in the locker room after the game and say, see, I told you we should have hit so-and-so 1. It's just working together to figure out, okay, who today, is it Gavin hitting in 3-hole, or is it Perry Argott going to the 2-hole and Luke going to 3? Different things that you talk about, how you maximize that lineup to score the most runs. That's it. And put the most pressure on the opponent.
Last year, we heard a lot about how important that 3rd game win at Miami was. You've only played 12 games, but can you pinpoint kind of one game this far that's either been really formidable for your team or just really telling of who they are as
Man, the Kansas State game sticks out. Back and forth, good team. Got down. We were down to VCU. I was interested to see down 4-0. After a big series, that was right after East Carolina, right? I think. I thought that was, showed me a little something like, okay, the guys, they wasn't a big deal. We're down, no big deal. Same thing. Like if you do lose a game, where they look like at the pregame breakfast, are they good? That type of thing. I would say those two games, and then finding, Sunday, when you've won the first two, that Sunday game's even harder. It's like, because you've won the quote series, right? So let's be real here. Like if we win 2 out of 3 in a super, we're going to Omaha. So if we win the first two, the series is won. Well, at this point in the year, if you win the first two, yes, the series is won, but now we're trying to grab every win we can because we know how important it is to be able to potentially be a national seed or play at home. So I thought we found a way to get it done on those Sundays when it's, when we weren't satisfied, I guess is the way I would explain it. I thought the game in Durham was a good test too, a low scoring game. A neutral site. That was the first game that was not at home. That was a Saturday game. So those three stick out the most probably.
Yeah, the Durham one, it was the weather game though. So it technically was
It was our first road game, right?
Yeah.
Away from Bosh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always interested to see what it's like when you go somewhere else,
Yeah, I mean, especially with the crowd, how loud a minor league park, it's definitely a different vibe. Well, going back to the grading, you said you watch the dugout, you evaluate yourself. Have you ever had to give yourself a bad grade?
Oh yeah. Yeah, like for sure. And if you don't, then you're not being honest with yourself. But you hope as you become older, we all should be getting more mature, that you're giving yourself less bad grades. And it's something that I firmly believe in, that you should grade yourself, as much as you can. And then understand like, okay, man, I'm a little bit more tired for some reason this game. I'm going to have to really challenge myself to make sure I don't miss a pitch. I might need to rely on Coach Jackson, Coach Weirs, Coach Gaines, Coach Howell a little more or whatever, because we all know that relying on each other and I write on my game card every day, trust your players and trust your coaches. But then also, be decisive. Because at the end of the day, I can ask, but I've got to make the decision who's going in, who's going out. But yes, I try to do that a ton and then be better and not like say, okay, well, it's okay, because it's not okay. In my opinion, because when you're leading the team, you have to grade yourself the hardest. You should, and understand how important it is to be positive, to be locked in, even if it's not so healthy and you have to drink 2 Red Bulls that day.
Well, I noticed, speaking of that, I noticed you pointed at yourself when, I forget who it was, got out at the plate. You sent them and they got out at the plate, and it felt like to me you pointed that's me. That's
a great grade. Yep. McCadden Dye, we're up by a lot. I'm thinking about a lot, who's going where, who's going here, who's going there. I don't need to think about that until the inning's over. Mm-hmm. But I did think about it, and all of a sudden the ball's hit. And McCadden Dye is one of our slower guys. Just get down the line and stop them. So those things to me, like I'm hard on myself about them because they're unacceptable, because, I know we're up by a lot, but I've seen teams come back too. And the next guy could have hit a home run. So, that's, I don't really need to point at myself. I just did that out of habit. But I did. You saw the right thing.
Yeah, we noticed. I thought it was a cool moment because it took it off of him. But pitching for the week, obviously, it feels like your weekend rotation is locked in, or is it? And then what you got for Coastal?
I mean, you have to give those guys credit. They threw really well. That was cool to see. We have felt like we could find some starters that could give us 5+. and you're rolling Aiden Houck out there. That's a good dang Sunday starter, reaching back for 94 at the end, change-ups developing. So right now we're going to stick with those three guys. I think, something could change at any time. You just never know. We're going to start Folger Boaz against Coastal. Excited for him. He's in a little more of a routine this week. Got his bullpen in yesterday. And then with us probably not playing Wednesday because of the weather, we'll just have some guys face hitters live if they don't pitch on Tuesday and be ready for that ACC opener against a really good Stanford team. And, which is exciting because that's two, baseball powerhouses over the last 20 years.
Last question for me, and we'll let you get out of here. Go-to post-game meal. You mentioned, I said it to start with, you mentioned the home-cooked fried chicken earlier in the week and made us all hungry in the press box. But what's your
healthy
go-to
or
meal?
non? I can give you want one healthy and one non-healthy.
Look, post-game, it feels like you can go unhealthy. But whatever you want to,
if
whatever
it's home
you want to
cooked, it's going to be either something my mom cooks, my wife cooks, or my wife's mom. And the fried chicken that night we got canceled against Florida State. The girls were going, in a volleyball tournament, and Beth, Mandy's mom, called me and said, "Hey, you want me to cook you fried chicken?" And I was like, "Is that even a question? Tell me what time to be there because it's homemade fried chicken." But if I can choose, and it's not at home, and we have the ones that are delivered here, I'm a hibachi fan. Right here, on Franklin Street, or I like to drive through the soda shop and get me a double gambler.
Nice. That's the unhealthy version.
That's unhealthy, but it is good.
It is really good. I miss Hector's double cheese on pita back in the day when I was there. It's probably added 10, 15 pounds, but it was worth it.
Yeah, you got to watch yourself 56 games, though. I can't be crushing double gamblers after every game, and I won't be able to get anybody. I have everybody thrown out.
Because you can't get down the line.
Yes.
Well, we always appreciate you taking the time. Grace, you got anything left?
No, that was perfect.
Okay, thank y'all. Thank y'all for all the attention our guys are getting. It's a great group, and I want to keep giving them as much attention. And we had that standing room only crowd, against Stony Brook. So we're excited about Coastal. We need all the fans to be there to help us in that game. And then Stanford, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We moved that game to 1:00 on Saturday. Give people plenty of time to get over to the Duke game. So hopefully the weather will hold up for us.
Yeah, you asked where we're going to be there Saturday. I guarantee you we'll be there Saturday.
I forgot I moved it up. But, yeah, my plan is to, be in the moment and play Stanford and then try to walk over to the Dean Dome and watch us play Duke.
Not a bad day in Chapel Hill at all. That's head coach Scott Forbes of the 12-0 Tar Heels heading into Coastal on Tuesday night. Grace Nugent, Coach Forbes, I'm Tommy Ashley. Appreciate everything.
Thanks, y'all.
Scott.
Have a great week.
Yep. All right, that was head coach Scott Forbes. I am Tommy Ashley talking about Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of the Inside Carolina podcast. Great friends of Inside Carolina, listeners, readers, watchers, however you consume your content with Inside Carolina. If you're a premium member, which the baseball coverage is free, but there's premium message boards, and the premium gets you 10% off your Johnny T-shirt order. Go check them out. They've got the baseball jerseys. They've got all the swag you need at Johnny T-shirt or JohnnyT-shirt.com. Also, email matt@congruityhr.com for your small to mid-sized business assessment. They will help you grow your small to mid-sized business to a national brand. They've done it for themselves. They can certainly help you do it. And also, if you're an Inside Carolina person, tell them we sent you. It's free assessment. We have that third sponsor, Big Game USA. You see the football back here. Check that out on Inside Carolina and on Tar Pit Premium message boards on football shows. Grace Nugent, let's talk a little bit about this week ahead. Coach Forbes referenced Coastal on Tuesday night, and then the weather could get the Charleston game, but the weather will not get the Stanford series because it's going to be a nice time in Chapel Hill. First of all, Coastal, a 10-2 team, I believe, if I looked at it correctly, assuming they do not play on Mondays. They'll come in as a 10-2 team against the North Carolina team, and they are talented. Just sort of share what you know about the Chanticleers and what they'll bring to Boshheimer, because they're going to certainly be looking for a resume builder for themselves.
Yeah, I think with Coastal, we get it every year. They're a little bit more on the gritty side. They always play some really gritty baseball. I think especially against UNC. I don't want to say that there's like a huge rivalry, but I do remember some of those games not exactly getting chippy, but they get down to the wire. They play really tough baseball. It's like the kind of stereotypical ECU UNC games that we see. What I'm super excited about is Caden Bodine. He's the catcher for Coastal. He's one of the best catchers in the nation next to Luke Stevenson. And so assuming Luke catches, last midweek they rested him one day, but if they're only playing one, especially against Coastal, I could definitely see him catching. It will be just an awesome, awesome battle to watch. I don't think people really not exactly appreciate catchers, but I think sometimes it's hard when we're used to having such a good catcher, and Caden is also such a good catcher. I think that seeing the two of them work behind the dish is just going to be really, really special. And then I know they have a few other guys that are hitting really well right now. Blake Barthol isn't hitting that well, but I saw him play this summer. He's really stepping up. I think he'll step up even more as the season goes on and kind of settles in. They have another kid named Dean Mijos, and he's hitting like 410 right now, which is a little bit similar to what Mr. Hunter Stokely is hitting. So I think it'll definitely be a tough matchup between the two. I'm a little bit more on the uneducated side of Coastal's arms, which don't anyone worry. I will make sure I'll be studied up before they play on Tuesday. But I do know that they have a guy that transferred from UVA last year. His name is Cullen McKay. I believe he leads them all qualified pitchers in ERA at a 1.46 in his 12 innings of work. He has 18 strikeouts in those 12 innings, which is just a really impressive number right there. I also watched him play this summer. He was great. I don't think he'll be throwing. I think they're saving him as their Friday to Saturday guy. But if this is a resume booster for them, you never know. You could see him for a few innings. So I think it'll be some really good, gritty baseball. It's one of my favorite midweeks that they play every year because these are always two really talented teams. No matter if Coastal makes the NCAA tournament, they always play some really high-quality baseball against the Tar Heels.
Yeah, it's always a fun game. Coastal has no love for Chapel Hill and North Carolina, so it'll be interesting in Bosh. 4:00 on Tuesday night, tomorrow night, if you're watching this on Monday, and then Stanford comes to town. We talked about it. We kind of joked about it. The possible media onslaught that could come with Stanford. Tell folks why, and tell folks what North Carolina can expect to see in a weekend series. It's hard to believe it's an ACC series, a conference series, when they're playing Stanford, but they are, and it should be a good one between the Cardinal and the Tar Heels.
I totally agree. Stanford is one of, I think, the most underrated programs in the country right now, especially in the ACC. The ACC has seen a lot of kind of flip-flop. State and Duke have really taken a downward dive, and Stanford, I think, is on that upward trajectory. They're a really young team. They were a really young team last year. This year, they only lost about 9 innings between the 2 years, which is like an absurd number. But the reason for all the media attention could be Japanese phenom Rintaro Sasaki. Most Japanese players in high school, they will go in high school and then they'll go straight to the Nippon Professional League. But that means you can't really be posted to the MLB until you're about 25 or 26 to get a full salary. That's what Otani did. That's why he comes a little bit later. But you can be posted early, like they just did with Rintaro Sasaki, who's not Rintaro Sasaki, with Roki Sasaki, not related, by the way, who's now on the Dodgers. They posted him early, and he's on a low-level minor league contract, so he can't make as much money. You have to use there's a bunch of bonus pool things. Anyway, what Rintaro decided is he wanted to come to Stanford so that he has that 3 years of eligibility, and then he can go on to the majors if that becomes his designated path. That is why he is here. That's not really something that you see. He came last spring to try to, he didn't play, but he came last spring to try to acclimate to the US. His dad is a pretty legendary high school coach in Japan, who I think actually coached Otani. There are multiple stories. D1 Baseball, Darren Vaught has a 6-part podcast series all about him, where he talks to a ton of Stanford players, people in Japan. It's really cool. A really cool international thing. It'll be really exciting to see him at first base at the Bosh. But then What sticks out to me for Stanford is their pitching staff. Matt Scott is absolutely electric. He will be pitching on Friday. He will be going up against Jason. I think that'll be such an interesting matchup to watch. Fun fact is Matt Scott, Caden Bodine, and Luke Stevenson and Kyle Johnson for Duke, they all played in the Dirtbags travel ball team, which I'm pretty sure if you're in North Carolina, you know them about. And then on Sunday, one of my favorite pitchers, college pitchers, his name is Joey Volchko. He will be pitching on Sunday. He's gotten his fastball up to 98, 99 miles per hour. It's like a not as good baby Jacob deGrom from what I've seen, which is only him a few times in his Stanford stuff. And then this summer, my friend saw him at USA and said he was just really blown away by what he has. They have a lot of good pitchers in relief too. I know Trevor Moore, Torin, those are some good guys. And then their lineup isn't necessarily amazingly explosive, but they're pretty solid throughout. Obviously, you have Rentaro, Charlie Somm behind the plate, Timo Becerra, I believe, at second or shortstop. So they have a lot of good options. They're still a really young team that's trying to put it together. And it'll be interesting to see what happens for them on their first cross-country road trip.
Stanford coming to the Bosh. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about. But that's why she's Grace Nugent, because she just told you all about the Coastal and the Stanford teams that will be bringing their talents to Chapel Hill this week. Stay tuned for Inside Carolina coverage on the Diamond Hills message board. Stay tuned to Grace and all her work and our stand-ups after the game live from the Bosh. Well, not really live, but we were live, but we weren't, you know what I mean. It's been Johnny T-shirt production. It's been a Congruity production. And it's been This Week in UNC Baseball with head coach Scott Forbes. Thanks, Grace.